Greetings, Chummer. We have got to stop meeting like this. I don't know what it is, but one of us just can't seem to stay away. Anyway, we may have lost the majority of the first half of Season 3, so buckle in. It's time for an insane amount of recaps, one after the other, starting off with Season 3, Episode 1, Industry. Still on the oil rig, the Neon Knights, shocked by their sudden encounter with Vivian, stood in uneasy silence for several moments too long before Arthur and Merlin cut in, doing their best to pretend to be Task Force ZER. Merlin, completely unsure of the actual task parameters, tried to manage expectations with their employer by getting a list of priorities from Vivian. Vivian was confused by her need for clarification and dismissed her questions. Instead, she simply handed Merlin a locked briefcase and told the team they had 2 minutes before being deployed beyond the tented containment zone. Arthur, meanwhile, dropped into Hot Sim to find out more about their task, leaving Lancelot to prop up his unconscious body and convince Vivian that nothing was wrong. Satisfied with Lance and Merlin's cover, Vivian left them to their task and exited through the decon room. In the Matrix, Arthur was met by a transverse program which he eventually bullied into leading him to the mission task force details. Apparently, ZER is a subdivision of a transport crew called the Mole Rats, who were tasked with recapturing and transporting S3Ep1-3, known as Nostalgia Boy. Arthur quickly sent this information out to the rest of the team. He realized too late, though, that this particular SCP had an unknown cognitohazard, meaning that their knowledge of the SCP might affect how it interacted with them. With less than 2 minutes on the clock before deployment, Merlin projected her spirit beyond the containment zone. Once in Astral, she was able to see SCP-10119 as well as several incapacitated facility workers. While observing Nostalgia Boy, his form shifted across the hall, disappearing and reappearing closer to where Merlin drifted in astral space. At this, she quickly disengaged and returned to meatspace to tell the party what she saw. Meanwhile, in meatspace, Lance and Percy struggled to open the briefcase. Prompted only to plug in a name, the duo attempted several phrases including Nostalgia Boy and Penumbra, but to no avail. Percy, frustrated by their sudden involvement in this task, asked Arthur to search for the real ZER, suggesting that they have Merlin pretend to be a Penumbra liaison and simply pass off the briefcase before leaving. Arthur agreed and found that the real ZER was less than a minute away. As soon as Merlin returned, Percy took the rest of the group back into the warehouse and left Merlin to oversee the handoff. Unfortunately, as soon as Merlin was alone, the wall to her left warped and Nostalgia Boy, clad in a set of Batman and Robin pajamas, appeared. He looked up to her expectantly and asked, "Mom?" Merlin, unaware of what the cognitohazard would have her do, decided to play along with the charade. After hearing her affirmation, the boy's eyes sparkled as his appearance and the room shifted. Merlin caught her reflection in the window and saw that she too looked different, now sporting a set of overalls and fluffy 90s hair. The boy shouted excitedly that they should go to Blockbuster to pick out a movie. Merlin, unsure of how safe it would be to follow, countered by asking if he had finished his homework. At this, Nostalgia Boy stopped suddenly, as if buffering, before the room shifted again into a school hallway. He asserted that his homework was inside the classroom and that Merlin needed to join him inside. Not wanting to follow, Merlin stood her ground and threatened to call his father. Upset by this, the boy threw a tantrum as a spell began to go off around him. Desperate not to get caught in the crossfire, Merlin fumbled with the counterspell, managing to limit the impact of his reality warping magic. In the warehouse, Arthur and Percy found themselves concerned by Merlin's delay and decided to check if the handoff was complete. Percy projected into Astral to see that the real ZER had reached the decontamination room and were less than 30 seconds from reaching Merlin. Merlin's signature, however, was frozen in place. Concerned by this, Arthur suggested that one of them head back out into meatspace. After narrowly avoiding Nostalgia Boy's attack, Merlin whipped out her 90s phone and attempted to contact Arthur. Thankfully, the call went through, and Merlin confirmed the worst. Arthur, realizing that the briefcase was probably a kind of reality anchor, asked Percy to transport his body back to Merlin so that he could use his technomancer abilities to open the case. However, Nostalgia Boy was on the offensive and threatened to turn the entire floor into a bottomless plastic ball pit. Merlin jumped out of the way with surprising dexterity and clung to the massive handle on the doors to decon. However, in order to hang on, she had to drop the case. In a last-ditch effort, Merlin recklessly cast magic fingers, barely catching the briefcase. Arthur, jarred by the sudden return to meatspace, was able to use his magic to open the case, but not keep himself from falling into Nostalgia Boy's trap. Finally, the doors to Decon opened. ZER stepped out into the hall, but was too confused by the scene to assist before Nostalgia Boy reached up a hand to pull Merlin under. Hey, you're still here! Next up is Season 3, Episode 2, Plastic Jungle. After falling into Nostalgia Boy's trap, Arthur slowly recovered and took a moment to observe his surroundings. He appeared to be in a strange, dark tunnel. The walls shifted abstractly, and the ground was coated in a mysterious kind of congealed matter. As he stooped to gather some of the gel, he was startled by the sound of Merlin crashing to the floor. Merlin, none too pleased by the situation, engaged in a brief argument with Arthur over their predicament before the back wall started to push them down the tunnel. Arthur suddenly remembered the briefcase and scrambled to sort through its contents, disappointed to find that it was not, in fact, a reality anchor. Merlin, tired of playing by Nostalgia Boy's rules, suggested that they try something seemingly counterintuitive. If the SCP wanted them to go down the tunnel, then they'd break through the wall that was pushing them in order to escape. Out of options, Arthur converted Excalibur into its railgun form, choosing to convert parts of the briefcase's contents into the ammo. The strange wall shattered on impact, pieces of it turning back into the tile floors of the facility. Without a moment to spare, Arthur shifted the railgun into a grappling hook, launching him and Merlin back into meatspace, and at the feet of Zeta Epsilon Resplendent. Meanwhile, in the warehouse, Lancelot interrogated Mr. Fish about his knowledge of the SCP facility. After some brief back and forth, Mr. Fish realized that the Neon Knights were looking for the factory floor. According to Mr. Fish, the group had made a wrong turn and ran into Vivian before they could course correct. Hearing this, Lancelot offered to continue their conversation under more hospitable circumstances. Together with Percy, the pair continued to chat as they passed through Lancelot's door to find some tea. During this conversation, Mr. Fish revealed that he only noted one semi-regular visitor at the facility, someone that the staff called the representative of the sister. Their path led them through Lancelot's door, labeled Heart, and out into a snowy pine forest. As they walked deeper into the trees, Lancelot remembered the last time he visited, alongside King Arthur, Bedivere, and his companion, an enormous direwolf named Ina. Eventually, Lance led the party to a large cliffside castle. He explained, wistfully, that this place used to be a kind of halfway house for the people of Avalonia who were down on their luck. As they continued into the courtyard, Percy noticed a set of recent prints in the snow above a cellar door. Lance confirmed that these were direwolf prints and that they should proceed into the underground kitchen with caution. With Lance in the lead, the party descended into the kitchen to find a memorial carved into the floor for Lance next to the statue of Ina. Lance took a moment to weather through his emotions before boiling some snow to make Mr. Fish's tea. However, the peace of the moment was disturbed by a shuffling sound coming from the cabinets. Back in the facility, Arthur and Merlin attempted to regain their composure in order to explain the state of the containment breach to ZER. Posing as a facility researcher and penumbra administrator, respectively, Arthur and Merlin were able to get ZER to authorize the acquisition of a reality anchor. However, they failed to convince the team captain to escort them out of the breach zone. The captain, instead, directed them to assist with the retrieval of a communication device from within the breach, since Arthur damaged the one in the briefcase. Arthur asserted that the SCP becomes more active when engaged with Merlin, and that she needs to leave. Without missing a beat, the captain drew a syringe and plunged the sedative into her neck. Merlin, barely able to react, projected her astral form out toward the warehouse in order to find the rest of the party. Team ZER, comprised of Big Sis, Bellamy, Sullivan, and Lucy, flanked Arthur as he drew Excalibur and led the MTF into the breach. He scanned the area briefly before covering his eyes with goggles to avoid seeing the cognito hazard. From his brief look, Arthur was able to identify several spatial anomalies that he marked by tossing glow sticks towards their location. The facility had shifted into the form of a sprawling, plastic restaurant play area. Nostalgia Boy was near. Under the castle, Lance and Percy braced themselves as they approached the cabinet. Mr. Fish, however, was poised to attack and quickly found themselves engaged with a small direwolf cub. After recoiling from the initial shock, Mr. Fish retreated, allowing Lance to slowly approach. Armed with a donut, Lance eventually coaxed the malnourished pup from the cabinet and into his arms. Percy and Mr. Fish swooned briefly at the sight. At that moment, Merlin's astral form whirled down the stairs to announce that Arthur was in trouble. Season 3, Episode 3, Containment. Back inside the breach, Arthur, his senses starting to betray him, realizes he has to think quickly in order to survive the encounter with Nostalgia Boy. Shouting to Team ZER behind him, he's able to obtain a granola bar, which he then crumbles and tosses across the room, hoping to figure out what will warp the illusion. Looking out over the facility, now appearing to be a restaurant play place, Arthur spots the crumbs as they get sucked into a large slide instead of hitting the floor. He reports back to ZER that reality is getting pulled into deep conical-shaped rifts that dot the area. The team also scans the room and reports several downed MTF agents and a few dismembered researchers to Arthur, who then decides to continue forward. Knowing that the restaurant wall in front of him isn't real, Arthur tries to push past the cognitive dissonance to reach the downed MTF agent. Using his pain inhibitor to stabilize himself, he breaks through the illusion and grazes the shoulder of another figure. Noting his success, Arthur shouts back to Sullivan for help, only to find that Sullivan is no longer behind him. In response, Sullivan frantically relays that Team ZER is in trouble. Arthur slowly turns back forward to see that he has touched none other than Nostalgia Boy. Although Merlin reported that the boy was small, the SCP that Arthur now sees before him stands 7 feet tall, with a pale, veinous complexion, vacuous ear holes, and skin that's pulled taut over a featureless face. Behind him, Arthur sees the downed MTF agent hanging lifelessly from SCP-101-19's gelatinous stump of a hand. Knowing that he's already passed the cognitohazard threshold, Arthur tries to convince Nostalgia Boy that he's taking him to see his mom. In the warehouse, Merlin pushes past Lancelot and Percy back to the main hall and explains the situation with Nostalgia Boy. Unsure of Arthur's status, Percy shoots him a quick message on his comlink. Arthur responds, prompting Merlin to stage an extraction mission via the astral plane. Meanwhile, Nostalgia Boy catches Arthur in a lie as he accidentally phases through an illusory wall. With time running short, Percy suggests that she and Merlin approach Arthur in astral and use shift and slip to return him to the warehouse. If Merlin's body is still near Decon, they can pull her body out first and let Lance run the Pez dispenser through Decon to safety while they save Arthur. Lance agrees to the plan, and he, along with Boblin, exit the warehouse. However, their astral presence is noted by one of the ZER members. An astral figure in a plague doctor's mask levels a scalpel at the group. Lancelot, remembering a name from the sign-in sheet back in the reception area, impersonates someone named 05-5 Blackbird in order to intimidate the plague doctor figure. The ruse works, and the figure disappears from astral space, allowing Percy to deposit Lance and Boblin near Merlin's body. However, her body was nowhere near the Decon exit like they thought. A warped tunnel sprawls out before Lance, who hoists Boblin onto his shoulder and runs forward, somehow falling up through the facility floor. Boblin pings Arthur's comlink and directs Lance to where Arthur is standing off against SCP-101-19. Seeing everyone gathering, Nostalgia Boy celebrates that everyone came to his birthday party. One of Team ZER, unamused by SCP-101-19's tricks, opens fire as Bellamy throws down the reality anchor. In the chaos, Percy reaches out from the astral plane and successfully shifts Arthur's body back out of harm's way, with Merlin retrieving his soul shortly after. Recalling the shape of the SCP's ears, Arthur suddenly realizes the SCP has a weakness to sound. With this in mind, he sends Yog-Sothoth to blare Happy Birthday over the local speakers. Back in meatspace, the creature screeches in pain as Boblin slides over and activates the reality anchor. Lancelot, now seeing the lanky form of SCP-101-19, levels a blow across its chest, sending it reeling backwards. From the warehouse, Arthur attempts to turn off the lights and send a message over the facility speakers, telling the SCP that its containment room is nice and quiet. The SCP slowly recovers its footing, after Lance broke several of its ribs, and seems like it considers Arthur's proposition. However, it's not done with Lance. As Lance readies another swing, the SCP's chest collapses in on itself and a rift opens up inside its torso. The rift begins to draw Lance in, and he attempts to hold his ground, but his strength fails, his legs disappearing into the vortex. Clinging onto the SCP's torso for dear life, Lance manages enough strength to throw himself away from the rift. Then, kicking off his Tetsubo, he turns in the air to face SCP-10119 and hurls one of Hook and Eye's spheres, a containment device, into the vortex. As the two extra-dimensional objects collide, time stops. Suddenly, with a jolt, Lance is thrust into the singularity along with Boblin. Join us next time as we recap episodes 4 through 6, and so on and so forth. Until then, always remember, never forget, the birds work for the bourgeoisie.